I'm Ben Ryman, and this is Behavior Speak.
Autism is something that is fairly new on the reservation for certain family members. Working with the Navajo Nation Human Research Review Board, one of the things that they expressed was that not everyone understands what autism is. So one of the encouragement was to identify what autism is in Navajo, just because, again, parents do take care of their grandchildren as well. So they prefer that we do come up with a Navajo word for it so that grandparents can understand what is really going on with their child as well.
In our Diné Parents Taking Action program, throughout the life of this project, the feedback that we have received from the family advisors, the parents teaching the lessons and the parents receiving the lessons, is they love that connection that they've made with another parent who understands what it is that they're going through.
In this episode, I speak with Navajo researchers, Dr. Davis Henderson and Dr. Candi Running Bear, along with Dr. Olivia Lindly, about their work adapting the Parents Taking Action program for Diné families. Together, they unpack how geography, language, family structure, and cultural values shape access to autism services, and how their team is working alongside communities to close those gaps. From telehealth delivery across vast rural regions to adapting AAC tools in Indigenous languages, this conversation highlights what it really takes to move beyond one-size-fits-all care. The team also shares their innovative next step, empowering parents to train educators, flipping the traditional model of expertise on its head. Let's get into it. Candi, Davis, Olivia, welcome to Behavior Speak.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excited to have this conversation. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge I'm producing this podcast in the territories of the Kalam Enclaves, Homoko, Comox, and Seychelles First Nations. So to get us started, could each of you introduce yourselves and then share kind of how you came together around this work? We could start with Davis.
Sure. I'm an associate professor at Northern Arizona University in the Department of Communication Sciences and Disorders. So my research looks at communication disorders among Indigenous tribes. So I specifically look at Navajo individuals, Navajo population. And then I started working with Dr. Lindly and also Dr. Running Bear, and that's how we got into the work of autism. I'm originally from New Mexico. I am Navajo and I grew up on the reservation. I am Red House and born for the Mexican people.
Amazing. Thanks, Davis. Candi?
Hello. Yes, my name is Candi Running Bear, and I'm an assistant professor at the University of New Mexico in the Department of Special Education. And I am from St. Michael's, Arizona. I am Hushkanadzo, Yucca Fruit Hung on a String Clan. And I was first introduced to doing this work as a PhD student at Northern Arizona University. And I came on as a project coordinator for the Diné Parents Taking Action project that Dr. Lindly and Dr. Henderson already had going. And I feel really grateful to them for being mentors as I've grown as a researcher and began my journey as a researcher. And my background is mostly as a special education preschool teacher. I taught for about almost 13 years on the Navajo Nation.
Great.
I'm happy to be here.
Lovely. And Olivia?
Thanks, Ben. I'm really happy to be here also. I'm Olivia Lindly. I'm an associate professor in health sciences at Northern Arizona University, along with Dr. Henderson. Most of my background training is in public health. I've always been really passionate about maternal and child health in particular, especially for children with special healthcare needs, including autism. I came to this work when I started at NAU in 2019 after a postdoctoral fellowship in Boston. Was lucky enough to meet Dr. Henderson at a new faculty luncheon. We started to talk about our mutual interests and providing services and supports to Indigenous communities close to NAU, including Navajo Nation. And from there hatched this idea of adapting a parent education and training program specifically for Navajo or Diné families. And the rest has kind of been history. We were lucky to meet Dr. Running Bear along the way and have her as part of our team. Um, yeah, so I am just really happy with how the work's progressed and that I've had the opportunity to be part of it.
That's amazing. For listeners who may be less familiar, what feels important to understand about the Navajo Nation when we're talking about autism and family support?
I think one of the things that we need to address and keep in mind is how sparse we are on the reservation. We're not very clustered. So some of us live in very rural areas. So getting services or resources for autism is very difficult for most Navajo families. And like any other family, we have, personal challenges such as having transportation, also financially, that can be a struggle as well. So there's a lot that we need to factor in that we have to think about when working with Navajo families on the reservation.
And in terms, so geography clearly plays a big role. Are there interesting things to know about, say, family structures and caregiving roles that might be unique?
Again, they all differ. So on the reservation, we do have a lot of families who do work off the reservation. So sometimes grandparents or other relatives, take care of their children as well while the parents are working. So again, there's a lot of guardianships that differ among Navajo families. So that's one thing that we have to think about and also take into factor. But again, within our Navajo families, we do as they say, it takes a village to raise a child. So that's how we think. We all do our best to help when we need to. So I think one of the thing is just having it's not just one family member where we all pitch in and do what we can for that family member.
Yeah, to add on to what Davis shared, it's even in our own families, we don't call our aunts and uncles aunts and uncles. They're also our moms and dads, and so it really is seen as everybody is raising the children in the family.
And in terms of autism, how has autism historically been understood or talked about within Diné communities?
I think autism is something that is fairly new on the reservation for certain family members. However, working with the Navajo Nation Human Research Review Board, one of the things that they expressed was that not everyone understands what autism is. So one of the encouragement was to identify what autism is in Navajo, just because, again, parents do take care of their grandchildren as well, and so they prefer that we do come up with a Navajo word for it so that grandparents can understand what is really going on with their child as well. With that said, a lot of times when we do work with Navajo families or as a speech language pathologist, some of the things that they talk about is we don't really know what's going on. We don't know why he's jumping around or, he tiptoes when he walks and so forth, describing some of these characteristics that are typical among individuals with autism. So, just having that background, I think is still a learning curve for many Navajo families. However, in our project, we understand that some Navajo families do go off the reservation to find resources and they become better educated by looking for these resources, such as moving to like Albuquerque or to Phoenix. So again, there are some families who aren't able to move to nearby cities. So then that kind of leads them to not having that resources to be better educated about autism in general.
So this interview is really centered around this parent training and assistance program that you folks adapted. What led you to adapt this particular program for Diné parents?
Yeah, so I think we were looking for a program that was evidence-based, first of all. So a program that had shown positive outcomes for children on the spectrum and their families through rigorous research, like a randomized control trial type study. And we also were looking for a program that had been culturally adapted for different communities and had a systematic approach to potentially do that for other communities. And in kind of doing our research, to find a program like that, we came across the Parents Taking Action program, which was originally developed by Dr. Sandy Magana and her colleagues, I believe, in Illinois. That's where she was when she started this work. And she developed it for Latinx families, particularly mothers, I think initially. And since then, she has spread it to different communities, including to families in Colombia. And initially, I should say, the focus was broader than autism. I believe it was on intellectual and developmental disability. But then she focused it more on autism specifically. And one of the things that she did, which has been really useful to us, is she used this ecological validity framework, which has 8 kind of core dimensions that researchers can use in partnership with communities, for example, working with a community advisory board or group to kind of go through the program, which is really a manualized intervention that originally consisted of about 14 different lessons about different aspects of, parent education and training, so for example, covering developmental milestones for children when they're younger, covering, what are the core kind of signs and signals of autism, things like that. And so she used this framework to help guide researchers that want to adapt it with communities for communities. And when we started this work, she had a work group kind of going on with different researchers across the United States that we were able to be part of. And that was super helpful just to hear about how other researchers were using that framework to adapt the program, for example, for Chinese immigrant families in the Chicago area, for Black and African American families in the Baltimore City area. And so, we felt really good about kind of the foundational work that had gone into the program. Another real benefit of this particular program is that it's open source. So it's free to individuals that want to use it, with this framework approach and involving communities, of course, with permission from Dr. Magana and others. And other parent education and training programs, there can be costs associated with them that are quite significant. And this program, does not have that. So those were some of the reasons that we were really drawn to this particular program. Dr. Henderson, I don't know if there are others I'm not mentioning that you can think of.
Not at the moment, sorry.
So that's amazing that this was a program that you found that had already been adapted to sort of a variety of different communities and cultures. What about the program felt essential to preserve, and then what kind of didn't fit in its original form that needed changing? Do you have a certification with the International Behavior Analysis Organization, the Qualified Applied Behavior Analysis Credentialing Board? the Behavior Analyst Certification Board, or are certified through your region's Behavior Analyst Credentialing Board, you can earn continuing education units for this episode by going to www.behaviorspeak.com and clicking on CEUs. The first secret word is Navajo.
Sure. I think, and I'll hand it over to Dr. Henderson and Dr. Running Bear because they really led the adaptation process originally. But we did have a community advisory group, and we still do for the work that we're currently doing. It's kind of shifted, and some people have stayed, and some people have needed to leave or moved on to other things over the last 6 years or so. But we originally started off working really closely with our community advisory board to guide us around what they thought needed to be changed about the program. And some of the changes were more maybe like surface level, I would say. So things like, the imagery, for example, being used. So being sure that we had culturally inclusive imagery. Some of it was around the language, of course, being used, and that necessitated a lot of conversation just about, what was the best amount of Navajo language to include in the materials and whatnot. And we did work with an interpreter on including different descriptions and terms in the Navajo language. We did want to preserve, kind of the evidence-based techniques that are included as part of the training program. So there are certain strategies that have been kind of pulled from different areas of behavior therapy, and they're kind of provided to parents in a menu, so you could, for example, use something like a token economy or a picture schedule or something like that with your child, or priming. And so we did want to preserve those in the curriculum. But again, trying to work really closely with our community advisory board. And then Dr. Running Bear really took the lead. We also did a number of interviews with Navajo families that had a child on the spectrum to really understand their preferences for this type of program. And Dr. Running Bear, maybe you can talk a little bit more about that and kind of what was found.
Thank you. Yes, we did use the feedback that we got from the parents in the interviews to make some changes. One of the changes that we made is there were originally 14 lessons, and we have it to 12 lessons now. And so there were 2 chapters that were put together. So we asked them questions regarding what it was that they wanted to learn, who they would like to receive the lessons from, and how much Navajo language should be in the manual. And using that feedback and then meeting with our community advisory board, we went over each chapter and we made some changes. For example, there was a story, I believe, in our session 2 lesson, and we made changes to that story, that narrative in there, to be about a Navajo individual with autism, and incorporated some of the in the story, some of the experiences that a child and family would have in there, such as having a first laugh party. So there were some changes in there like that. And another part is there's a narration that happens throughout the manual, and so I did that narration, recorded myself, and so that was another part of the adaptation. And I know we are still getting feedback from our family advisors and family members who have received these lessons and hope to incorporate maybe videos showing Navajo families using some of the evidence-based practices that are taught in this manual as well.
And what does the adapted PTA program then look like in practice in terms of structure and pacing and participation and leadership? How's it all run? What's it look like?
Sure. Well, I think, it does vary kind of according to the community and the parent and family needs. But kind
Mm.
of how we initially rolled it out is we did this. Well, first, we actually had Dr. Christina Lopez, who's in the School of Social Work at Arizona State, come up to NAU and do a 2-day training with us, kind of a train the trainer about, how do you train community health workers, so parents who share the same cultural identity as the community that's being served and have a child on the spectrum. And so she came up and did a training with us. Dr. Henderson was there, and we opened it up to anyone who was interested really in the community to come and do the training to learn more about the program. And from there, we recruited community health workers, which, as Dr. Running Bear mentioned, their preferred title is family advisor in our version of Parents Taking Action. And so after we had recruited and hired the family advisors as employees through Northern Arizona University, then we did kind of this intensive training with them. And it was, all of this was our initial kind of run of Diné Parents Taking Action was during the start of the pandemic.
Oh, wow.
And so that kind of forced us because historically it had been delivered more in person. But because of all of the safety concerns at that time, we tried to do as much as we could through like telehealth, so using Zoom and whatnot. And so our initial training, and I think our second training too, all were online through Zoom. And so during that training, we go through each one of the lessons or chapters in depth with the family advisors and give them the opportunity to ask any questions they might have. We also had some guest speakers, some of whom were members of our community advisory board, come in and provide some additional information. So, for example, we had a school psychologist come in and talk about IEPs or individualized education programs in the United States that many children with autism may have to access school based services, and also how children are evaluated in the United States for autism within the school system. So we tried to kind of supplement, what was in the lessons and covering that with additional expertise from professionals that work in the community. So they have that experience as well. And then we also covered things like, kind of self care and timekeeping, just kind of things to help the family advisors do their job, effectively, but also take care of themselves. And then from there, they began delivering the program with families that we matched kind of according to scheduling, availability, also lived experience. So we had a number of kind of criteria we tried to use in matching the families with the family advisors. And then from there, it was kind of up to the family advisors and the family they were matched with to determine, the frequency, the schedule of when they would cover the lessons together, based on their mutual availability. and other kind of life circumstances that happen, like kids getting sick or someone passing away in a family and whatnot. And so we really didn't try to pressure, or give any kind of set schedule. We did kind of recommend, if you can try to get to the lessons, one every other week. That tends to be a good frequency for families that have been part of other projects. Um, but we tried to leave it pretty flexible. We also provided
Mm.
hotspots to some families and some family advisors that had internet connectivity issues to help
Mm.
facilitate the delivery of the lessons. And I think that's been helpful logistically. We've had to kind of figure that out institutionally, how to do that. But I think we have a pretty good system in place for it now. And so that was kind of how it worked with the first phase, I would say, of the
Mm.
program. We also did an evaluation to look at the feasibility, the acceptability of the program from both the perspective of the family advisors and also the families that were receiving the program.
Mm.
We also looked at fidelity, so how true to the program was it being delivered? And so we had the family advisors fill out a checklist for each lesson. And then we also recorded 1 to 2 of the lessons that they delivered and had a study team member go through the checklists independently. And we found very high fidelity between the two. We also looked at some outcomes that are commonly assessed as part of the program. So one of them is child social communication.
Mm.
We also use this family outcomes survey that's really widely used in early intervention programs across the United States. So all of the measures had some kind of evidence base behind them as far as
Mm.
being valid and reliable. However, I will say none of them had ever really been used with Navajo families. So that was a limitation of our
Mm.
evaluation. But that was kind of the first phase. I don't know, Dr. Henderson, Dr. Running Bear, if you want to maybe talk about how the second phase with Project Descend was rolled out similarly, but also a little bit differently.
I think one of the biggest differences was what Dr. Henderson added with the AAC devices.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. So the second phase that we're thinking about is working with Navajo families, and also we are now including the Hopi tribe. So we are still working on one of the for the parent taking action. We're in the process. We would like to adapt again and change. There are some things that we could change for the Diné families. And then also we're working with the Hopi tribe now with Ms. Rema and also Dr. Sekeiestawa in regards to getting a resolution to conduct study on the Hopi tribe as well. So right now, that's our goal to get a resolution for Hopi. And then also, as Dr. Running Bear mentioned, that we will be implementing AAC devices, augmented alternative communication, for Navajo children and Hopi. So one of the process
Mm.
is to create is to collect some speech samples so that way it is more culturally appropriate and linguistically appropriate for both Navajo and Hopi as well.
Mm.
The other is creating and implementing icons or pictures or figures for the AAC devices that are more culturally appropriate as well.
Mm.
So working with the Hopi tribe, one of the things that our first priority is being culturally responsive to what's appropriate for them, not only Hopi, but also for the Navajo family as well.
Mm. Mm.
So that's what we are working on right now in regards to implementing AAC devices. And then we will be also adapting the PTA towards Hopi families as well. So again, all that was talked about in regards to language, using certain specific images, and then also with the Hopi tribe and the Navajo, we implemented the Hajal, and then we have to think about, the same similarities and beliefs for Hopi tribe as well, making that connection as well. So these are certain things that we have to think about foundationally, so that way we are being truly culturally responsive to both in that sense as well. So we are excited and we're happy that we get to further our study in regards to reaching out to other tribes as well. The other tribe that was also interested in our study was the White Mountain Apache as well. So hopefully down the line we will be able to work with them as well. So right now, Hopi is our focus right now in regards to with the addition to the net families as well.
And another part that we're thinking, or that we are working towards as well, is adapting the Diné parents taking action for educators. So essentially, a Diné parent who has a child with autism will be teaching these lessons from the adapted manual to
Cool.
educators. And this comes from a need that we've heard from the community, is that we have had educators reach out to us wanting us to provide information about working with children with autism. And so that's another way that we hope to adapt the program for Diné families and for or Diné educators and Hopi educators as well.
No, I love that. I love the idea of the parents being the one empowered to educate the educators. It's usually the other way around. It's a great innovation. What made you decide to look at that route? It's cool.
Well, my background is in education, and that is one of it's a need that really hasn't changed, where there are quite a few educators who have not been trained to work with children in autism specifically. And so receiving these lessons would be beneficial to the child, to the educator, to the families, to the community. And so I think it really will be powerful. Something that I do want to share as well is our Diné Parents Taking Action program. Throughout the life of this project, the feedback that we have received from the family advisors, the parents teaching the lessons and the parents receiving the lessons, is they love that connection that they've made with another parent who understands what it is that they're going through.
Yeah. And, I think typically the approach to train educators would be to bring in, someone like any of you three or myself, another professional or a trainer to come in and do that teaching. But for that to come from the parent with the lived experience, and also likely the parent of the child they'll be teaching, I just see so many positive benefits coming from that outcome. Have you seen approaches like that before? Is that part of the parent training, the PTA program, in sort of the other models, to have parents coming in and working with educators, or is that something that you folks have come up with as an innovation?
That's a good question. And I believe there has been talk about it before with another community, if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Lindly.
I think maybe, I think in California, there might have been an adaptation. I'm forgetting the name. They're called regional centers in California. Each state has a very kind of unique early intervention system. And so I think there was maybe some work a while ago to work with staff at the regional centers, but I do think that what Dr. Running Bear is proposing and trying to lead with the educators in the Navajo Nation is innovative. I don't think that specifically has been done.
No, I want to give that to you for sure. This is yours. This is really neat. I think I look forward. I think we'll have to have another conversation and dig into more about how that's going and how that works. I think that's going to be really I'm excited about that one. I'd love to, you shared a little bit of it already, Dr. Running Bear. I'd love to hear more about parents' experience with the program and their feedback and kind of a bit more on that.
Yes. So the parents, these lessons have been mostly received online. And for the most part, um, it seems that that has been beneficial for both the family advisor and the parent receiving the lessons.
Hmm.
As we know, families who have a child with autism, their lives are very busy, and so it makes it possible for even our family advisors who don't live nearby. So
Hmm.
we might have a family advisor who's living miles away, providing these lessons to parents. And so I know that part that um, it seems overall that they're benefiting from that part. Though I believe initially parents taking action was supposed to be done in person.
Hmm.
And though I think that would be great to do, as Dr. Henderson mentioned earlier, the Navajo Nation is really
Mm-hmm.
big. And
Yeah.
so it would, if we had a family advisor living on one end, traveling to the other end, I mean, that would be hours of travel
Yeah.
each day to make those lessons happen. But like I mentioned before, our parents have shared that some of them, there are a lot of them actually, who did not encounter or speak to another Diné person who had a child with autism. So
Wow.
this program has made it possible to build community
Hmm.
and for also families to share resources with each other. We've also compiled a list of resources for our families that we give, but we are always asking and getting more information to add to those lists that we share with families.
The second secret word is family. Yeah, that's really cool. I was going to ask about that. Some might say it was unfortunate that you had to take a telehealth approach initially because of the pandemic, but I was thinking the same thing as Dr. Henderson mentioned about the vast. It's a lot of rural services here, and telehealth can be a great way for folks to access services. It would be interesting down the road to compare in person and see what was preferred. I imagine for a lot of those folks, the telehealth option would be preferred, and really cool that you were able to connect people. And again, I don't know anything about the area or the Navajo Nation, but amazing that sad initially and amazing now that these parents, kind of within the same community but so far from each other, just didn't know about each other, and that you were able to link them. Have you seen the fruits of that sort of a few years later in terms of those relationships maintaining and sort of other things kind of spinning off from that maybe weren't part of the project?
Well, many of our family advisors have told the parents that they've worked with to keep their number and to
Mm,
please reach out
mm,
even after the end of the project. So,
mm.
um, so I think that many of those relationships are continuing.
We did meet in person as well. We had several, as
Mm.
Dr. Lindley mentioned earlier, we gave presentations and we invited all the parents. And of course, there were some who are still online as well. So we were able to meet in person, listen to presenters as well. And then at the end, we did a retreat as well. So we did that on campus and we invited everyone. So that's what we did as well.
Hmm. Dr. Henderson, when we met before the interview, you had also talked about some work. I'm really fascinated by the inclusion of AAC in this. I think it's essential and amazing. You had also talked about doing some AAC work for Navajo elders who have experienced strokes. I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so a lot of times I do get some emails from
Mm,
outside SLPs working at the medical center here in Flagstaff asking, like, oh, we just had a patient who had a stroke and only
mm,
speaks Navajo. What are some resources or availability that you have that you can come and, work with us with this patient. So I think a lot of that was when I was working with them, I was like, oh, using an AAC device in English was not the first step. So because a
mm,
lot of our elders would speak Navajo, so a lot of
mm,
that was we were more dependent on the pictures rather than the high iconicity of using both icons and the language as well.
mm, mm,
Um, so one of the things I thought was, okay, we need to make this all in Navajo. So
mm,
that was very helpful because a lot of times, just the basic communication, like I'm hungry or I need to go to the bathroom. So these were the basic communications that they needed to tell someone during the time they were in the hospital. So that's
mm,
where it all extended. And it kind of made me think like we need more culturally appropriate devices that would benefit not only individuals with autism, but also the Navajo elders, not only Navajo elders, but, Hopi elders. So there
mm,
are other indigenous tribes here in Arizona. So I think that's where it all extended from is knowing that, everything is not culturally responsive as our Hopi partnership
mm,
entails, and that's something they really focus on. So,
mm,
yeah, so I think it all extended from there, and just knowing the limitations of using AAC devices,
mm,
and then working with Navajo children who have autism. Sometimes, again, they communicate or they live with grandparents. So again, all that
mm,
language could be in Navajo as well. So so we come from a diverse background in regards to we are all different living on the reservation. So again, we do. I think language is central to our
mm.
culture, and I think that's spoken in every home. So even if English is considered the primary language, but Navajo is still spoken and used in a Navajo home as well.
Yeah, yeah. And what's been the feedback there? I mean, I imagine for a lot of these folks, I mean, I think for anyone, AAC is often a new idea in any community. What's been the feedback from folks using AAC devices and in terms of accessibility and improvement of quality of life?
So, in regards to using AAC device, I think many of us have iPads now, so
Right.
we
True.
don't need to buy special devices. Again, we
Mm,
just have to purchase the app, which can be
mm,
downloaded into the app and can or into the iPad and can be used in that way as
mm,
well.
mm,
One of the things that is required for using an AAC device is training on how to use an AAC
mm,
device, how to organize, and how to work with an individual who is nonverbal, how to use an AAC device as well.
mm,
So in our study, we did give several AAC devices to some of our families, and then we had an research assistant who is in the field of speech and language pathology, was able to train Navajo families online of how to use an AAC device.
mm,
So that took about an hour to hour and a half. So
mm,
if they had questions, they would have. She was able to respond, and also I had to supervise that
mm,
training as well as part of her training.
mm,
So yeah, so we do have some Navajo speech language pathologists who are coming up, and they are definitely learning from our research as well,
mm,
implementing AAC devices. In regards to communication, of course, language is central to communication. So overall, again, I think implementing an AAC device, not only with younger children, but elders as well, I think that would be more beneficial as
mm,
well. So again, the lifespan, it's I'm using an AAC device is not limited based on age.
mhm,
Anybody can use an AAC device. Of course, it takes a while and a lot of training as well.
mm,
So one of the things that we would like to do is not only focus on, individuals with autism, but also hopefully this is implemented throughout as well. Through maybe this could be the leading in regards to the use into the medical field as well.
yeah, really cool. I'm curious about because you're definitely right with iPads now, and it's you no longer have to spend thousands of dollars on a Dynavox. It's things are a lot more accessible. You can buy programs for sometimes under $100. What's been your experience with these programs in terms of how easy they are to adapt culturally, and are there certain programs that you might recommend to folks to use because they're more accessible in terms of kind of making those changes, because often the symbology and whatnot is really built in, and it might be more difficult to do those adaptations.
So prior to getting my PhD, I worked on the reservation as a speech language pathologist.
Oh, amazing.
And a lot of times, one of the difficulties that we face was not all family members have electricity. So we had to use,
Of course.
although we do recommend some type of device, but given where they lived and the availability of electricity, we used paper. So we use PECs, picture exchange communications.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
we relied on that. So we would make home visits, or the parents would inform us like, hey, we were able to work with this individual with our child. However, we need more pictures for him to communicate. So working in the schools, we printed a lot of, so that was a lot of, we introduced pictures. So we did have binders for our students living in very rural areas as well,
Yeah.
but we still implemented the AAC device, but keeping the same pictures and having that layover in regards to, or that overlap in regards to using the same picture. So we did a lot of training at home, and also with the parents. Sometimes I invited them to the schools to see what we were doing in regards to working with the picture exchange communication system, because you're not going to learn it right away. It takes time. So it takes a lot of hand over hand. And as a speech language pathologist, we say, carryover needs to be done at home as well.
Yeah.
So if parents aren't able to carry over, the task or the implementation of PECs, that would be difficult. So a lot of times we had a lot of parents who are very dedicated, and we, while working in the rural schools, I would hold small meetings with parents, and we would have like a small training about AAC or using the PECs so that they could implement it at home as well. So working with Navajo families is something I like and I also enjoy. So again, we have to think about all these different diverse backgrounds of Navajo families, where they come from, how they live, and so forth as well. We did have some family members who would bring their AAC device back to the school, and they would charge them in school, and then they would take it home. And so they had to, implement the AAC device, and then they would transition over to the PEC. So again, that was something that we had to. So I had to be aware of as an SLP, and knowing, how Navajo family, the background of Navajo family. I knew like, okay, we need something else to implement in case, something else happens. So I always had to be like 2 or 3 steps ahead in case of something happens. So I think that was one of the challenges of working with Navajo families on the reservation as well, just knowing the background and the limitations.
And then in terms of the symbols themselves, modifications in terms of the language is I think is easy to understand. You're sort of translating the words. And did you find you had to sort of create new symbology when doing this work? And tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so not all Navajo families have stoves, like a cooking stove, right? So sometimes they have like a wood stove where they actually build a fire to cook dinner or breakfast. So a lot of times family members would actually use actual pictures of their stove, even bathroom, an indoor plumbing versus an outhouse again. So we had to think about all these different modifications, and sometimes we had to use realistic photos for individuals because that can be challenging as well. And then we think about diversity in regards to, religion and tradition, what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. So a lot of consultation with family, using certain icons and not to use certain icons. Again, I had to think about that as well, So, even though as being a Navajo SLP, I still had to be culturally sensitive with my own people as well. So I think that was one of the challenges. That's why I would always sit down with family members and we would go over some pictures, and some family members would say we don't want to use this picture. Is there any way we could use a different picture? So you try to implement these different types of picture, and you become very creative. I'm not the best artist, but sometimes just you had to draw certain things. But thanks to new technology today, I think that can be done easily. So again, it's very, I wouldn't say complicated. It's just there are all these layers that we have to think about when working with Navajo families. And then I'm pretty sure there are going to be different layers when working with the Hopi tribe as well. So again, for me as a researcher, a Navajo researcher, I find like I'm always learning something new, and also working with this study as well. Like I always tell Dr. Lindly and Dr. Running Bear that I'm also learning in this study and working on a different, I'm used to give me some numbers and I can run some stats, but, just having different experience, I'm learning not only, with my Navajo families, but also with my colleagues as well. So there's a lot of factors that that we have to think about in regards to using an AAC device when it comes to pictures. What do families prefer and not prefer? What's appropriate? What is not appropriate? So, again, I will probably learn something as we're working on the AAC devices that I would think, the basics. But then when we actually go into depth about certain things specifically, I think I'm going to learn from my Navajo families as well as the Hopi families as well.
Really cool. Olivia, when we met before, you had mentioned a bit about related research on autism in Indigenous communities. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that and what might be important to highlight for listeners.
Sure. So we all are involved in another study that's funded by the National Institutes of Health through a mechanism that's specific to Indigenous health research, which is really great that's still in operation. And so our study that we all serve as investigators on is really about understanding how autism assessment is aligned or misaligned with Diné culture, including values, beliefs, etc. So for that study, which was awarded, I believe, in 2024, we have been gathering information from different groups that are involved with autism assessment. So Dr. Running Bear and myself kind of co-led the portion of that project that was interviewing Diné families who have a child on the spectrum about their autism assessment experiences. And then Dr. Henderson's been leading the portion that's more about practitioner provider perspectives on administering autism assessments to Diné children and their families in and around the reservation. And that's involved both interviews and a survey. And then we have two colleagues that are in Northern Arizona University's Institute for Human Development, Dr. Rhonda Jensen and Dr. Michelle Lee, who have been taking the lead on the portion that's doing observations of autism assessments with Diné children and families. And so they have a clinic that runs kind of in and around the reservation in Northern Arizona. They do assessments in person mostly about once a month. And some of those assessments are with Diné children and families. They're also working to try and do some observations through the University of New Mexico's Autism Assessment Clinic because they also see a number of Diné children and families for autism assessment. And so those are kind of the three components of the project. We've finished the data collection for the parent interview portion, and we're finishing the analyses of that. Dr. Running Bear is going to be presenting about the findings at the International Society for Autism Research annual meeting this spring in Prague, which is exciting.
Wow.
And then Dr. Henderson is finishing up. The interview component with practitioners is completed. We're still doing a little bit of survey data collection, but we're beginning the analyses on the provider interviews currently. And then we're still collecting the information from the observations of the assessments. And so we're really trying to use all of those different information sources to provide a more complete picture and really recommendations, especially to clinics on the reservation in Tuba City and Chinle, and around the reservation that are conducting these assessments with families so they can be more culturally inclusive. That's not to say that they're not, but there's always room for improvement, right? And a lot of the practitioners that we've worked with over the years are really hungry for that information because they do really want to better serve the community. And so, we're hoping that the information will be useful and make autism assessment even more accessible to Diné families in the future. I don't know, Dr. Henderson, Dr. Running Bear, if you'd like to add anything. The study is officially called Advancing Hojo and Autism Assessment. We call it AHA for short. But I don't know if either of you have anything to add about that work we've been doing.
Yeah, so we definitely have as Dr. Lindley was saying, we did I'm in charge for AIM2. So we did a survey, and also we have interviewed practitioners in regards to, like, have they adapted what have they done to adapt, it's their assessment or environment, or the assessment in general, and also just thinking about how do their parents understand what autism, do they understand what autism is, and so forth. So just, like using basic terms and so forth. So we have collected some data. So I'm learning how to sift through all the information that was provided with Dr. Lindley's guidance.
The third secret word is land. Looking ahead, what feels most important for practitioners, researchers, policymakers to take away from the work you're doing?
I think for me is knowing that not all culture is universal. And even within our own Navajo culture, we're also diverse. We all differ as well. I think a lot of times when I'm a big advocate of standardized assessments. I'm not saying they're all bad. I'm just saying, we just need to step out of the box a little and use informal assessments and alternative assessments to look at different components of communication, whether it just be speech and language or individuals with autism, also looking at social skills as well. So I think overall, we need to just be cognizant about all these differences in regards to individuals and what is appropriate in regards to truly identifying what is a difference in regards to a language impairment, speech impairment. So these are some of the things that I think we need to definitely look into specifically. And just working in a field of speech language pathology, we do lack speech and language development among Indigenous individuals. Some of the things that working as a speech language pathologist, we compare Indigenous children to mainstream development where there may be some differences there as well. So I think that's something overall, I think culture responsiveness is something we still need to be cognizant about.
And kind of finally, what are your all of your hopes for the future of autism supports within Diné communities?
I think it should be continued. I think it's a big need.
Mm.
Even though within our small little study, I think, but you know, like Dr. Running Bear was saying, it brings families together, and there's inclusivity in regards to not only Navajo families um, who live in major cities, but also Navajo families who live on the reservation. I think one family member, um, actually, a parent advisory was telling me that sometimes they feel like they're forgotten because they're on the reservation and that they have limited resources, and sometimes
Mm.
resources is not available to them as well. So I think overall, our study is making some headway, although it may be a little, but I think it will still. Obviously, other tribes would like to be involved as well. So I think we're in a good place, and we would like to still, continue to work with other Indigenous tribes, and also just providing some resources. And we may not answer all the questions, but at least we're helping in some way, providing services and resources to Indigenous communities.
That's awesome. All right. Dr. Henderson, Dr. Running Bear, Dr. Lindly, this was really cool. I love the work you're all doing, and appreciate y'all coming on Behavior Speak to share. Is there anything else you might like to add before we finish?
I think just if folks are interested, they should feel free to reach out to us. We're
Yeah.
always happy to hear people's thoughts about needs and then potential synergies or what other folks are doing in different parts of the world, related to autism services and supports for Indigenous communities. So, please feel free to contact us.
I love that. Great. All right. Thanks again, everybody, for coming on. This was awesome.
Thank you for having us.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
To learn more about culturally responsive autism services in Indigenous communities, check out these 3 episodes of Behavior Speak. Episode 37, The Realities of Autism in First Nations Communities in Canada, with Dr. Grant Bruno. Episode 147, Culturally Responsive Care in Indigenous Communities, with Dr. Jaxie Toretta. And episode 190, Behavior Analysis and Indigenous Ways of Being, with Leslie Peters. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok, and subscribe to our YouTube page at Behavior Speak. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.